All right, we have to follow up beatboxing, but it'll be okay, I think. So, as the main sponsor of this event is the Sweeplay, so we kept with the gaming theme. Web3 and gaming, it's not new anymore. It's been around for like 5-ish years, maybe. But it hasn't really took off, I think, the way some would like it to. Of course, we have people trying. We have AI gaming now. So we're going to focus our discussion on like Web3 gaming and how ownership in AI will change the future of gaming. So why don't we, introduce ourselves, and as a mini icebreaker, tell me your favorite video game when you were a kid. Not now, kid.
Perfect. I'll start off here. My name is Marcus Mazzocato. I'm a product manager over at Atoma Network. Atoma, we're less so directly on the gaming side, but we're fully on the AI side. So we're a full-stack AI hyperscaler built on SUI, which pretty much means we service AI models to anyone looking to build. We have partners, some of them on the stage, such as Anomaly, who are leveraging these models to bring AI to their gaming experiences. But man, as a kid, I don't know, like Mario Kart Double Dash kind of had me by a chokehold, but put way too many hours into that than I'd like to admit.
I just realized we're indirectly telling our age when we play this game.
Hello?
Hello, hello. Oh, hey folks. I'm Matthew Shera. I'm a game director at Anomaly. We are a Toronto-based game studio that builds games using emerging technology. We love Web3, we love AI, and anything to serve our player and find the fun. Make experiences that people haven't experienced before, and create games that we dream of and write about in science fiction novels. And if I have to say my favorite video game, I mean, it's a little easy, but I think Pokemon was probably my favorite.
Oh, no, it's a good choice. Which one, though?
Pokemon Red.
Oh, I had blue.
Yeah.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Paul. I am CTO and co-founder of my startup called OP Games. And I guess with what Matthew said earlier around how Web3 and games really hasn't found its footing, I've seen that. Because my startup, I used to run a game company called Altitude Games, and we started in mobile gaming and console gaming, like DS, like in older phones as well, like before the app stores. And so when we found Web3, this was around 2018 as well, and a lot of the narrative around that was how can blockchain change games, and that's why we started the startup. We found like a lot of interesting use cases for blockchain, and now we're also moving into AI. And I would say like it's really a good discussion that we're trying to find what AI and Web3 can do for games here. And with my favorite game, actually got the sticker that represented it is Street Fighter. So I love Street Fighter. So shout out to the other Street Fighter folks there. And yeah, so I'd love to play Street Fighter with all of you guys also. Yeah.
And for the record, I'm really giving away my age here. My favorite was Banjo-Kazooie for the Nintendo 64. Nice. Do any of you know what that is, or am I not good?
I know what that is.
I feel like Wii is like the oldest generation console for most of these people here. So ownership is sort of the key aspect of like Web3. We've seen it before. I don't play a lot of this game, but I know Counter-Strike, a lot of ridiculous money has been thrown around for knives and guns. What do you think Web3 and AI what does that mean in respect to ownership to you? Well, we'll do it like in a row.
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting when you bring AI into the mix of ownership. There's been that whole bubble, as you mentioned before, that really never found its full footing with gaming and crypto. A lot of it came down to the play to earn and people farming it more than actually playing the game itself. I think the issue there was more so that the games weren't focused on the actual fun and entertainment. It wasn't the actual experience that people were focusing on. It was the monetary gain. And when you have things structured around there, you're never going to have a game that's going to really hit the mainstream. I mean, there were some that did, but again, they were for the monetary benefit. I can think of like Zed Run in the early days. Picked up a lot of steam because, you know, put some gambling into some horse racing. Like, who's not going to get involved in that back in those days? But with AI, it gets really interesting because you have this concept of agents, right? And these autonomous agents. And, you know, for the sake of this discussion, let's say these agents take the role of like NPCs or characters in a game you're playing with. If that ownership and that association of the relationships that are built can be registered on the blockchain and then can be permanently referenced, or, you know, when you're in that world of having maybe items that will, you know, you have the proof of ownership with a CSGO knife, for example, but based on some respective instructions associated with a large language model, you can have that item grow or shift accordingly. There's a lot of different ways that AI kind of fits into here. And it all kind of, I think, really completes the pieces that weren't necessarily there initially when Web3 gaming was getting picked up. And really excited to see what comes from that. I think we've got some great teams over here who are going to be showcasing that. So excited to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting question talking about ownership, especially in the Web3 space. You know, we always talk about converting players to shareholders. You know, when you invest in a Web3 product, you're not just buying a game that you could maybe sell back later, but you're joining an ecosystem. You're joining a team of founders that create and build a product. And I think what you said, AI is so big, the scope of it, that we really don't fathom how deep that's going to go into ownership. You know, one thing we love doing with agentic frameworks is like building a narrative that is the agent, and that narrative is told by someone that's building the world that's an agent inside of your game. And so how do you decide whether you get bread or whether you get something distributed to you? That's decided by an NPC. You know, if you go there for a coffee, one day they might give it to you for free. If you buy 50 Pokeballs, maybe they'll throw in an extra one because they like the way that you were dressed or like the way that you talk to them. You know, it's all about how do we make these experiences fun and unique, and how do we make them serve the player? I think ownership, when you give players ownership, they feel much more connected to the product that they're part of.
Hello. Yeah, it is a really interesting term, right? Like back in 2018, when we talked about game ownership, Counter-Strike was the model, right? Like people would say like these items, you don't really own them. Like you're just renting them from Steam, or I guess right now, like a good example with Street Fighter, right? Like the game used to be just you pay and you put a token to play the game. And now how the game is monetized is you buy the costumes that the player wears, and you kind of think, I'm paying $20 for this costume, and do I really own it, right? And it's kind of what the narrative of blockchain has been around games and ownership. And it's very interesting that you said, Marcus, around AI and ownership. There's this platform called Virtuals, wherein people can list their own agents. So I guess it's very similar to when people were making NFTs and building communities around these NFTs, like Monkey DAO and Bored Ape Yacht Club, where ownership of the community is based on who owns these NFTs. And then with Virtual's case, it's like whoever owns these coins, right? They own the agent is kind of I guess the governance structure that's coming up. But again, like as you mentioned, a lot of this is so new. Like we don't really know what ownership means. I feel like we could take all night to interrogate what ownership really means, right? But I love the question. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of weird, especially we're moving away from the physical copies. You know, PlayStation sells a version without it, a disc, and like with the physical copies, you could go to a store and get some money back and sell it used, but with the virtual ones, you can't do any of that.
Yeah,
and
definitely, right?
And they don't really give you a discount for the lack of the physical ones. If it's $90, I can't believe they're $90, but that's a problem for another day.
Yeah.
If it's $90 at the store, it's $90 online.
Yeah. And I think in early days of NFTs, right, there was some sort of like trading fees. You could buy and sell the NFTs. So people tried to experiment with the model. But I think now because the market is not so great. Like we're kind of not as experimental as we have been. So.
Yes, that's true. So Matthew kind of dabbed on this. So if you want to skip this, I'm cool with that. But so like, in what ways do you think that ownership can change player-developer relationships?
I'll jump right into there. I think ownership and changing that relationship, Matthew was bringing up some really good points there. I think the interactions the user has, and now we're able to be in a position where you can have tailored experiences fully personalized to the user, which is something that really hasn't been done before. And the example that I always throw this is like Telltale games. Like Telltale games were like set experiences, pure decision trees, right? Like choose A, you have the choice between like A, B, C, you know, choose that, keep going forward. With AI, it's still technically a decision tree, but it's a very unpredictable decision tree. Like you are not going in a route where, you know, it's like 1 to 5 options. You're like limitless options, really brought down to the capabilities of what the large language model is capable of doing. And these models now are, you know, hundreds of gigabytes in size, up to like 700 billion parameters just for open source models. So when you have access to these kind of experiences, you go from a world where the developer gives the story that they wanted to tell to the user, and now the developer is giving a game to the user and letting the user tell their own story based on what they've built out. And that's something that's been really exciting, I think, for me to look into. How many times have like anyone played a story mode game and like you're just pissed off at a decision that's happened? You're like, why would you do something so stupid? But if that isn't always the case, like what if you and your friend have a different experience going through the same game? These are just like, it takes a whole new level into entertainment, right? Like entertainment, we're so used to having a set structure, but when you're able to tailor this to what you want and what you want to desire and see, you have a whole new world to kind of captivate yourself with.
I did not think of that at all. Like what you're, it sounds like it's a way to create like a game that has infinite, like playthrough type possibilities.
I mean, like it pretty much is though. Like, you know, you look back at, let's scrap video games as the direct thing and look at like tabletop games, right? Like Dungeons and Dragons, and, you know, have a dungeon master create the story for you to go through. At the end of the day, the same principles made through like typical story-based games when a game designer is designing it. But if you're using a large language model and system prompting it to behave in a certain manner, like pretend you're a dungeon master, pretend you're doing this, it has all the context available that it was trained on, which for the most part is up to like 2024 internet data. If you can't create infinite stories based on what's happened on the internet, like up to 2024, I don't know what to tell you. But yeah.
That's true. That's true. Do you want to elaborate on what you said last time, or I'm kind of putting you on the spot?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're really talking about AI agents, you know, there's such a broad future that you can look at. Because I was just at GDC last week, and people have AI agents that are using Stable Diffusion to build games in real time. And so what essentially that means is you could answer a personality quiz, and by the end of the quiz be playing a game that's completely tailored to you, visual content, all the assets, theme of the game, genre, logic of the game, personalized to what type of person you are. And I think we're only at the tip of the iceberg of AI, which is kind of the scariest part. But you know, we think about it like not that long ago we were paying for text messages, you know, and it's one of those things where we want to satisfy the player and give the player the best experience possible and use these emerging technologies, but we don't want to shove things down people's throat. You know, it's almost like the account abstraction in Web3 that's so important. You don't want your onboarding process to bring someone into this world that's completely unknown to them. You want to introduce them to these products while they still kind of can relate to it, and it has a story. You know, if you give someone that just a large language model that doesn't have any instructions in it, it's not going to give you a very compelling narrative right now. But in the future, you know, it only goes up from here, you know.
Yeah. I just wanted to like mention the Telltale deep cut. Like I love the Walking Dead games. So I think those are the kinds of games that I also personally like, wherein like the narrative can change according to now what AI can do, right? So that's super interesting. I guess one thing I also did want to mention, because I love this conversation around like how AI is changing the workflows of game development. Like now, people were making stuff with Stable Diffusion, right? Like it's so easy. And I'm sure like if people have been keeping track of crypto Twitter, there's this term called vibe coding where people will just say something to an LLM like make me a game, make me a snake game, and then it'll just make it immediately in one shot, right? And so it's changed how I guess how code is valued. Like code now is so cheap that you can rewrite like a game design immediately. And we haven't really seen games that are doing that now. So that's kind of what excites me, is seeing just new kinds of genres that will come up once these workflows have been just optimized for AI.
So not just with gaming, like ownership in AI has always been sometimes controversial. I heard a song by Shakira, and with quotes because it wasn't really her. It sounded like her. It sounded like she did a song where someone forced her into a room and said, "You have 4 hours to make a song." So it wasn't good, but it did sound like her. And I can't imagine if she heard that, she'd be too happy about that. But when it comes to AI content, like who owns that?
Oh, frick. Who wants to touch that? Yeah, you were looking at me, so yeah, it's a tough question. Like right now, like there's a lot of lawsuits coming up, right? Like even with OpenAI around how it's being trained by content on the internet that they didn't get permission for, right? And so, like it's tough. Like I feel like it comes down to whose side you're on, right? Are you on the side of whether you want AI to become as useful as it is, or on the other side of making sure that it's benefiting the right folks, right? So I think it's a spectrum a little bit, but yeah, I don't really have a clear answer for that, right? I'm building on AI, and in our case, we do see how it's going to change how games are going to be made, and we work with a lot of indie developers, and indie developers, there are also people who are uniquely affected by this, right? Because it's an art form for them, and they feel like the art is being taken away from you when like someone can just make it one shot and devalue what you're working on. So I feel like as long as you have a good vision of who you want to benefit from this technology and build it for them and have them in communication with you as you build it, then you're better off than most, I feel. So that's how we're building it.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost one of those questions where it's as much philosophical as it is realistic. You know, when you type a question into ChatGPT, is that plagiarism when you hit enter? You know, because that large language model has read so many books and so many publications from people all over the world to synthesize the answer that it's given you. I think, generally speaking, I'm on the side of that's not plagiarism, but we have to be careful with any of these tools. You know, we see tools like Scenario where you can upload a library of photographs and train a small language model on just your library of photographs. But even then, do you know which section of the code is using just your photos and which section of the code is using someone else? I think you have to approach this with a realm of like, what is fair use? And I think when you look at fair use for AI, it's trying your best to use it as a tool and not just cookie cutter taking something from an AI tool and shipping it in your game, but getting artists to at least look at it and make sure that it's appealing and do touch-ups and finalize it to serve your player as best as possible. But, you know, I would say as a tool, most of the time, you're not going to get in trouble. But, you know, with anything, this is not legal advice.
It's funny jumping into the legal side of it, though, because I think the biggest question mark around AI constantly is where does the regulation stand? I was chatting with a studio in Japan earlier today, and they mentioned to me that like the legalities in Japan are currently really gray. Like models can be trained on all IPs, you know, they can be trained on these IPs, and the artists hate it. You know, it's a big concern, right? If the, you know, oh, is it okay? My bad. So there's like a big concern here because obviously, like as these models get more integrated into your daily usage, into the hands of developers, of studios, what happens to the artists who created the IPs that these models are trained on, right? That's the big glaring question. At the end of the day, none of us really know, because as regulation may come around, regulation does tend to impede progress, right? And do we want to impede the progress of potentially the biggest technical revolution we've had since the Industrial Revolution? Like, that's a big concern. You know, I'm on the side that let's not impede the process, but I'm also a little bit worried about where that may take us. So I don't know exactly where I stand.
I mean, there are some areas that are more gray, and then of course there's like the Shakira situation, which is not gray. That seems, but I mean, we're not. I've never listened to a good AI music or song. I don't know if either of you have. At best, it's okay for like background music for a video, but it's learning, right? So who's to know that like, oh man, this song is awesome, and like that's by this person, and they're like, that's not this person, that's a machine.
But it's also how many music producers are now using AI in their Ableton Push to speed up their workflow. How many artists are using Canva AI or Adobe Firefly? You know.
When does it? Do you think it'll become the new auto-tune? That this question just sprung on me. Sorry.
I think it might be like I was watching Jacob Collier, like he had a collaboration with Google, right? Like he was making stuff with AI. So yeah, so I think if you're at the top level and you're like someone who can really make art, it can like really elevate your art form, right? But again, like that Shakira situation, that is concerning, right? Yeah.
So we're a DAO here at Toronto DAO, and for those who are new to this game, it means a decentralized autonomous organization. And there's been talks about kind of implementing this in Web3 towards the games. Do you think it's something that it's a model that Web3 games should adopt, like a lot of Web3 elements, or should it just be centralized but just using the ownership games and NFT style gaming system? Sorry, lost my voice there.
Yeah, I can start. Like that's something we're really actually investigating. Like I mentioned virtuals earlier. Our company put out a vibe coding agent on virtuals, and the idea is what kind of games would an AI make, right? If it was controlled by community, if it was not centralized. For example, if you're making a game like in Japan, like it's so centralized. Like there's a game designer that decides everything, and then there's like a whole process on how to make the game. But what if it can just vibe code and imagine whatever game, and then the game just goes to wherever the community wants it to go? It can maybe ride on waves, it can just take the cultural elements like memes and blockchain, right? A lot of that goes into these Web3 games that you see. So it's something that I'm exploring. I feel like there is something there. And if you look at mobile games, for example, right? Like a lot of mobile games, they have a different model from centralized games. They kind of look at all the games on the App Store and they copy each other and just find the best one that gets the best hook, right? So I feel like AI games will find some sort of, I guess its own spirit, something like that, wherein it's AI games where it's super fast coding and it's more like these quick experiences versus like the very centralized ones, right?
I think there's really two different avenues. You know, you can really focus on, is this an experience that is supposed to be showcasing technology to people, or are we trying to make a fun game? And I think when you look at, we're trying to make a fun game, you think a lot about stuff like account abstraction. You know, we want people to not know that there's crypto, that there's Web3. We want people to not know that there's AI in this product. We want someone to open it and fall in love, you know, retain and be inspired and get sucked into a world that they really enjoy. You know, for me, the technology is always secondary to, can we make an experience that people really want to attach to and love?
Yeah, to actually piggyback off that, I think that's a really great point. I think it was actually at GDC, but one of the co-founders of Mistin Labs, Adeni, was just mentioning, like, why do we keep calling this Web3 gaming? Like, it just needs to be gaming. Like, when you start throwing around certain terms and trying to make that your selling point, you're no longer trying to make a fun experience. You're just trying to sell the technology. And while that works in, like your typical B2B SaaS and that kind of structure, this is gaming. Like your community ranges from like 6-year-olds all the way up to like, whatever age wants to play your game. And at the end of the day, even when you look at like the perspective of a DAO, like a lot of time DAO gets convoluted with a community. But communities form around fun games, right? Like look at Smash Bros, Mario Kart, Street Fighter. Like these are all games that they have diehard communities because they're just fun. And I think that's like the key point to look at that.
Yeah, I think I feel like you need to have a combination of both, because too decentralized could also mean nothing gets done, right? So you got to have a bit of back and forth. Now, with the play to earn, do you think that's something that could retain or bring on new Web 2 game? I don't know why. I'm gonna start over. Do you think like these play to earn or this ownership model or these tokens that you access on the blockchain, do you think that can help onboard Web 2 gamers, or traditional gamers, I should call them?
Yeah, well, just also a point, like I've seen play to earn and I've seen it grow, because I used to be based from the Philippines, and that's kind of one of the main area where that started. And I guess the question was, can it be used to bridge Web 2 players, right, into Web 3? I think if you're like a game developer that's, I guess, really building games for the craft and wanting people to play games because it's a story that you want to tell, it's an experience that you want to give them, you probably won't attract the players that you want, because a lot of these people that are playing in Web3 are playing to earn, right? They're there to earn. They're not there to play. And so you'll attract an audience. Like it's any incentive mechanism, right? Like they're there for the incentives. And so if you don't balance that out, then you're not going to get the right players. But I've seen it work, as I mentioned, in the Philippines.
I think if your goal is to make a play to earn game, it's probably not a very good goal. Your goal should be, let's have a user base and let's find a persona that really loves a game, and let's create a game that serves those players. If you're building a game for people that love card games, or if you're building a game for somebody that loves Animal Crossing, you have a target demographic that you're trying to hit with your product. And play to earn is an experience, and I think it can be done successfully. But if your goal is, make everyone money that plays this game, that might not necessarily happen. What can happen that's really powerful is you divert funds from your whales, your most invested users, to players that are trying to onboard. And so it's a similar cost as like user acquisition, but at the same time, we've seen in gaming across the last 2 years, 3 years, user acquisition is more expensive than ever. So creating these alternative avenues to acquire users through unique metrics, stuff like encouraging people to participate in reward systems or earn airdrops, it's a new wave of user acquisition that we're kind of trying to tap into, because user acquisition is a bit full, saturated at the moment.
So we only have like a minute. Do you mind? So we've fortunately run out of time, but I'd like to thank our panelists here for joining us. If you like this was a bit of a sneak peek. Every Thursday at 2:00 we have our Twitter space. Tomorrow we have Koi Network. Feel free to tune in on that. It's again every Thursday at 2:00. Thank you very much, everyone.